ultimately the two sides have a deal, which means they are tied to one another in some form, which I think does make it harder for the US to completely walk away from Ukraine.
Where are we with the Ukraine peace talks? I become lost every day.
I think a lot of people feel a bit lost on it, including here in Washington, because you had one piece of news that felt as though it was moving towards progress, which is that this week you finally had the minerals deal signed between the US and Ukraine. Of course, that was a minerals deal they were meant to sign on that infamous night in the Oval Office, when it became a big blow up between Zelensky, Donald Trump and JD Vance. And that means there is now a plan for investment from the US into Ukraine. The US gets something back, but ultimately the two sides have a deal, which means they are tied to one another in some form, which I think does make it harder for the US to completely walk away from Ukraine.
It does, doesn't it?
But then you had later this week a situation whereby we're now hearing reports that the US no longer wants to be part of formal negotiations, won't be flying around, and JD Vance has been playing down the idea there'll be a deal anytime soon.
Yes, it seemed to me, reading the latest stuff, that it was rather more optimistic than pessimistic that some sort of deal might be struck, and that by implication that deal with Ukraine meant it was rather more punitive towards Russia.
Yes, and I think what you can definitely say is there have been frustrations in the White House at points of both Russia and Ukraine. And you can debate and say, is it fair when they say, oh, Ukraine has not done enough, or say things that are just not true, sometimes about, the amount of money put into the war. But I think the current mood is Donald Trump has got something he wants from Ukraine now. And that means there is more pressure on Russia because so far, Steve Witkoff, Donald Trump's negotiator, former property real estate guy, he's been meeting with Putin, he's been smiling, but he hasn't got much back yet from Putin. And I think that it does feel as though we could be in a place where the US takes more hostile action against Russia at some point if they don't start to move towards these talks.
I look forward to that if it happens. And just briefly, Mike Waltz, the last Waltz, who has departed as a security advisor and is going to be kind of pensioned off to the UN. Is this a great loss to the world?
It depends who you ask, of course. I think what's interesting in terms of the politics of Trump world is, so first off, it was reported that Mike Waltz was going, and it was only about 7 hours later, I think, that Donald Trump then said, oh, but I've given him a different job, which I think meant some of the snap analysis that we'd seen that afternoon on the various cable channels had to be redone. But effectively, there are a group within Trump world who always thought Mike Waltz was a bit of a hawk, perhaps even a neoconservative. And this more isolationist wing, I think, are hoping that, yes, Marco Rubio has this role in the interim, but there's a lot of talk right now in Washington about who is going to have the role in the long term. And with big decisions coming up on various conflicts in the next 100 days, including potentially Iran and how to approach it, I think who has that role is going to be quite telling as to the direction Trump may end up going in.
Well, and it also means an end for me making jokes involving the word waltz and other kinds of dance, which is very sad for me. Thank you, Katy.
And that's the main takeaway.
It is the main take on it. Thanks a lot, Katy. Look out for Katy Bull's new column in the Sunday Times.
Donald Trump has said his next 100 days will focus on tax-cutting legislation, new funds for mass deportation, in what he's called the One Big Beautiful Bill. The president has confirmed the surprise departure of Mike Waltz as National Security Advisor, who will instead be nominated for a UN ambassador role. Heather Conley is a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State under President George W. Bush and joins us now. Heather, welcome back to the show.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
Heather, what did you make of the departure of Mike Waltz? Is this the Trump administration quietly pushing Mike Waltz out because of Signalgate, of course, and the other lapses in national security?
Well, really good reporting suggests that Mr. Waltz's style within the White House was not fully appreciated, that He viewed himself as a principal, meaning that he was served to be served. And what reporting suggests is that no, this was a staff position. So I think there were just clashes of style as well as clashes of position. He was considered very hawkish on Russia, very supportive of Ukraine. And of course, there's just increased suspicion of the part of the Republican Party, the MAGA part, against sort of traditional neoconservative Republicans. So I think this was already a clash that Signalgate obviously created the impetus. But the president waited until after the 100-day celebration. And then, yes, of course, this story broke very quickly. It is interesting. Normally, when Mr. Trump has fired national security advisors, he does not find a new role for them. So this is a softer landing. But of course, when Mr. Waltz has to be Senate confirmed, all the Signalgate stuff will come back out again. And in some ways, it's an opportunity for members of the Senate to really pry apart the first 100 days of Mr. Trump's foreign policy.
I don't know whether you watched the cabinet meeting on the 100 days. And I just wondered, in your experience of cabinet meetings, are they always like this? I mean, perhaps when the press is in, people behave differently, but there seemed to be the sort of adulation towards the president, the praise. It reminded me more of a sort of, Henry VIII's court, his Privy Council, rather than a US cabinet meeting.
Well, these are very atypical, and I think you have to see them as part of the performative element of press conferences, where this is about performing to a very specific segment of the audience. So I think the cabinet meetings and going around the room and saying very generous things about the president's leadership, that's not wrestling with the problems at hand, but it's part of a performative element that is part of, one could argue, an effective communication strategy, but it's not the typical use of cabinet meetings for sure.
Heather, are we going to see Congress get involved in the huge decisions that this president has been taking in the first 100 days? Most of them will be done by executive order, but now we are being told that the next 100 days are going to be a focus on tax-cutting legislation and new funds for mass deportation. Is he going to have to go to Congress for this money?
So absolutely. And we just saw that in the last 24 hours with the administration presenting its budget. And that's really just the first contact. And then Congress really dives right in. You're absolutely right. The first 100 days, Congress has really not played any meaningful role. Controversial cabinet secretaries have been approved. I think in many ways, this Republican-led House and Senate have been waiting for instructions from the president. And as you referenced, the big, beautiful bill, they're concerned that they don't know what the president wants or if the president will change his mind about important issues like taxing the wealthy. So I think we're going to see that challenge of not, they're going to go in one direction and then the president will change his mind and then they'll have to flip very, very quickly. You also have Republicans that are clearly very nervous about the impact of the first 100 days, which we're only going to begin to see in the second 100 days, economically, as well as the deportations. The judicial system is bringing a halt to this. And until there's real pressure on members of Congress, I think they'll continue to pass what the president wants, even if they're not sure what he wants.
Heather, thank you so much for giving us your time. Hope we get to speak again. Heather Connolly there, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State under President George W. Bush.